Dr Paul Cribb, welcome and thanks so much for being on my podcast.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me in.
Oh, it's great. To tell you the truth, I was really excited to reconnect with you because it's been probably 6 or 7 years, maybe longer, since you've been down in Geelong. But, I guess some of my followers won't be super familiar with you, so I need to introduce you. And you are the founder and chief executive officer of Metabolic Precision, which is an absolutely outstanding blueprint for recompositioning one's physique. And you have a really strong academic background. I believe 3 undergraduate degrees.
Yes.
Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. And you did a PhD on body recomposition.
Correct.
And I think in maybe 2006, you were officially recognised as one of Australia's leading scientists.
Yeah. There was a contest sort of thing, but yeah, I was put it this way. I got to hang out with some really good scientists for a weekend, so that was cool.
That would be super cool. And even though you spent a number of years studying health and fitness and particularly body recomposition, you did that, and all the while you were actually running your own personal training business. So, yeah, that would have given you that real world experience as well.
Very much so. Yeah, very much so. I think I've always been a personal trainer. I think it's the only gig that I've ever had, really, and I've always been working with personal trainers for as long as I've been an adult, since I was 19 years old. Yeah.
Yeah, so it would be fair to say that you really have dedicated your whole life to health and fitness, understanding the human body, and then helping people.
Yeah, it's probably the only thing that I've been interested in. Apart from surfing, it's probably the only thing that's really helped my interest, yeah.
And I think that you maybe picked up your first barbell at about the age of 13.
Yeah, that's it. We all did that. I think there's a lot of guys did. I talked them into buying that barbell set, at the A-Marts or something like that, yeah. And you do arm curls with it every day for the next 5 years.
Yes, I think there's a few young fellas that have done that, that's for certain. And look, I've always, ever since I first heard about you, I followed you, and I remember getting a phone call from a friend of mine from Albury Wodonga, and he said, "Oh, do you hear that Paul Cribb, Cribby's running this course in Geelong? Do you want to do it?" And I said, "Okay." And he said, "Oh, it's such and such thousands of dollars." And I said, "That's okay, sign me up." And I had no idea what it was all about. We just jumped on board. So
that's a big compliment. I didn't take that one either. That was very, very, very big of you, thing. I know. And then you probably dragged about 40 trainers with you, I'd say, over the next 5 years for that. So I've got to thank you for that one too, I think.
So I thought, I've got some great questions, because I've got a good following on my Facebook page called Figure It Out, an honest insight into sports modelling in Australia. And like I said, I actually put it out there to them and said, what would you like to know from this guy? He's a bit of a guru. Now, that word's thrown around a lot in the fitness industry. And I said, I tried to make the point, but this is a genuine guru. What do we want to know, girls and boys? But I'll pepper it with a couple of questions that I want to know as well. But how about we roll straight into this one, Paul? Will a great physique ever come in the form of a tablet or a pill? Or is it always going to come down to hard work, consistency in the gym and kitchen, and behavioural change?
Yeah, it's I know we sort of see all the developments, and especially things like Current Affair always like to try and promote the latest thing that's going on. But really, to be honest, the more we sort of delve into human physiology and biochemistry and the response of our DNA to the environment, it just gets more and more complex. And I think even though that we've got a DNA and those sort of things identified now, I still think we're a long way off even having any sort of pill that, well, look, put it this way, Ingrid, the one thing I always like to point out to people is we still can't build a heart as good as the one we've got. We can't build kidneys. We can't build a liver. So we can't even build organs, let alone, you know, make dynamic changes in health to someone yet. So that's why we've got to pretty much look after what we've got.
Yeah, right. Okay, so the short answer is
not for a while yet. No.
Not for a while.
I think we're still in a job for a while, yeah.
That's good. That's somewhat comforting. I guess you've always been really highly driven, and like I said before, you've created this amazing blueprint, Metabolic Precision. I mean, it really is a one-stop shop for providing the tools, the strategies, the knowledge, and also the support. You have a very strong community with, affectionately, the MPers. But what drove you to create Metabolic Precision?
Well, I suppose the thing was, as a personal trainer myself, I grew tired of standing alone, trying to convince my clients, you know, that what I was doing was the right way or whatever it is. And I always thought, gee, wouldn't it be good to have some sort of science-based, you know, complete process that you knew that your clients could see and see other people changing from it and know there was scientific evidence to it and there was a logic to it and it was mapped out and could be contoured and all that sort of stuff. And that's pretty much why I drove or did what I did. And that was the whole reason why I went back to university in the first place to do a PhD, was to actually get some answers on transformation and how the body can change. And that's, I suppose with MP, the whole thing is it's just all about the latest, or not so much the latest, but what we know about transformation, putting it into an easy understand process for people to be able to follow. And a lot of people probably think that MP is my ideas and my beliefs and that sort of thing, but MP is just really the end product of research, and whatever the research says, that's what I follow with the program. I don't sort of just make stuff up. Everything's in there for a reason. It's in there because there's a wealth of data that's supporting it. And so that's kind of the thing with MP. It's not like I'm sort of married to one sort of eating plan or one sort of way to train or whatever it is. It's pretty much based on, okay, if this is what the research says it's going to help the vast majority of people, then this is what we do. This is how you build it into the process.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I love the premise that you taught, and I'm pretty sure it's in the Metabolic Precision book, but you said a great diet has to do three things. The first thing is that it has to improve your body composition. So AKA, it's got to make you look better. The second thing it needs to do is it must improve your health. So no good looking fantastic and feeling like a piece of crap. And the third thing it's got to do, which is equally as important, is it's got to make you perform better. And I think I recall you saying not just perform better in the gym, but perform better as a mother, as a daughter, as a career lady or man, you know, in all facets of your life. So if an eating plan makes you look better, feel better, and perform better, that's a great plan. Now, that's a great selling point for me on MP because it really captures the essence of it. And people kind of go, I want some of that, don't they? Because that just makes sense. Because if we look at most diets, certainly all the fad diets, they're lucky to address one of them, maybe two, but really they don't get the three of them, do they?
Yeah, it's a hard trifecta to get, isn't it? And that's
very much so.
Yeah, if you look at those sort of things, you'll find they do tend to fall down. And as you know, like with what you've been doing over the years, getting people ready for contests as you do, you know firsthand that it's very easy to chase the top of the triangle, the body composition, and you know people that want to do that a lot of the times they tend to neglect the other two, like you said, how you look, function, and feel. And if you're chasing the top, there's always consequences for the other ones, isn't there?
There is, definitely. Yeah. So what you're kind of saying with metabolic precision, even though, like, so for the listeners, you're given a very comprehensive book that goes through different chapters, and you learn different educations over the 12 weeks, which I might add, that 12 weeks gets ideally repeated and repeated. Even though everybody gets that same information, I guess there's always a concern that, oh, but that's generic. But it's not really, is it, Paul? It's not generic, because you can adapt. Let's say, for example, your complex carbohydrates, you might have less, or you might have more, or more often, depending on what your goals are. So it's not generic. It is individualized, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I suppose you've got to look at it this way. With nutrition, it's like anything else. I like to compare it to, say, building a house. Too many people try and jump to the refinement and, picking out the curtains and the light fittings or what have you before the foundations have been built. And that's pretty much what MP does. It teaches the foundations first and makes sure that someone has a strong foundation. And only when you've got the foundations, then you can start to build the other aspects. Then you start to refine it and really create it your own. And it's no different to building a house, because the structure still has to be there. The concrete slab or whatever's still got to be there. But as you know, everyone's house ends up a little bit different based on the way that they want, they want the certain refinements in their own home. And your diet and nutrition plan has got to be the same sort of way. There has to be the strong foundations there for you to be able to fine-tune it. Unfortunately, I think what a lot of people tend to do is they tend to jump into wanting to refine something that isn't really there yet.
I would say that you're absolutely right with that. That's a common mistake. And I guess that's because everyone's so gung-ho to get to the end point that, that's just what we do as humans, because we want everything yesterday. But I think that's the house analogy is a really good one, and I'm sure the audience is like nodding their heads and relating to that. Just kind of a little bit about. I mean, we're going to talk about training, but so that we get to know a little bit of you. I know that you mentioned that you surf, but do you train yourself still? And if so, how regularly? And I'd love to know, like, what's your go-to? Like, do you have a particular way of training that you generally do, or do you mix it up? Or come on, tell us. What do you do?
I suppose the thing is with me, by the time I was 26, 27, because my background was in rugby league. That's all I ever wanted to be growing up, was a professional rugby league player, and I actually got my shot with Seagulls rugby league club, and I had a contract with them, and I played a handful of A-grade games, that sort of thing. But the training that we did, like we used to do like heavy squats, heavy deadlifts, heavy benches, and all everyone was worried about was how much weight you could lift, and the conditioner was just hell bent on making sure that you could bench a certain amount of weight. And my back just used to cave, and I used to ache for days, and what I didn't realise what I was doing is I was actually wearing out the discs in my spine. And by the time I was 24, I'd actually retired from rugby league because I couldn't stand up properly. And by the time I was 26, 27, when I had a thriving personal training business, I was in Melbourne training some of the most high-profile business people in Melbourne. I was, and I'll say it even then, back in the 90s, I was charging $300 an hour, and I had more work than I knew what to deal with. But I had to turn around and end my business because I couldn't stand up properly. And the reason was I'd virtually ruptured my 2 lower discs. And wow. I ruptured them basically over a period of years of incorrect squatting technique, incorrect deadlifting technique, and trying to chase numbers and trying to chase, what everyone else in the gym's doing, that sort of thing. And it sort of really taught me a very severe lesson, because I lost a large portion of my life trying to get those operated on. And as it is now, I've got 4 titanium cages in my lower back. I've got 3 discs removed and an artificial disc. And I've got osteoarthritis in my spine that would stop a water buffalo. If I put it that way.
Wow, that's really significant.
Yeah. And so my training, I suppose, once I did finally get back to the gym, was just all about mobility and movement. And I really had to just throw the whole, overload concept out the window in a lot of ways, because even today, like when I had that operation when I was 28, 29, and I'm 51 now, I couldn't do any sort of heavy loading through my spine because I didn't have the discs, L4 and L5 in my back that really support your lower back. So I've had to learn how to train in a way that still promotes muscle growth and maintains muscle growth, but flexibility and mobility as well. So all the stock standard, the irony is when we just used to do our courses, and I still love doing them, teaching people how to squat and deadlift and bench press, but how to do it now without destroying their back, because that's pretty much what my passion was, because I saw how it was going firsthand. So yeah, with my training, I suppose now I still use barbells and dumbbells, but I have to modify my exercises so that I don't have that direct loading on my back. But I also do still use a lot of kettlebell work, and I do use a lot of TRX band work, because I find a lot of that stuff really does help balance your physique. As you get older, and I'm sure you can relate to this, you do get minor injuries, and you do get
minor. What are you talking about?
Well, you get all that sort of stuff, don't you? And you get the lack of, or you lose flexibility and mobility, and so you really start to look to your training now as, you want to build muscle, but you want to make sure that that you're supple and you're flexible and you're strong, and you still want to, like I said, like I surf, I love surfing, and I need to be supple and flexible and strong for that. And I'm sure anyone's got an activity that they love to do, and they just want to feel better for it. And I think that's where the training now over my years has become very, I hate using that word holistic, but I was always a hardcore barbells and dumbbells kind of guy, and I still think they're the foundations for changing anyone's physique. But I really think there's still those other modes now that you need to look at to really put those finishing touches to give you that quality of life with what you're doing.
I think this is really fantastic stuff, and I'm kind of moving a lot more even with my business towards dealing with 40 to 60-year-olds, some things that want to be strong, but also want to be really mobile. And it's no secret that my passion is powerlifting, and, I'm doing 200 plus weights with your squats and deadlifts. But look, Paul, up until the age of 45, I didn't really know what an injury was. I had no concept of injury. And now it takes me for squats and bench and deadlifts, it'll take me around 35 minutes to finish my foam rollering and my band work in order to start the work.
Ing, I am with you, and I tell you, exactly right. You need to do a workout to warm up to be able to work out.
Yes. I'm always saying to people, "Oh my God, I'm stuffed. I haven't even started yet, and I'm sweaty and hot." But I guess the body's now primed.
Yes.
And that is something that I think when you start to get to say 40, you've really got to address how you warm up and cool down. And things like the band work, the TRX, even kettlebells and foam rollering, I can't believe how important it is. And it's interesting, I just coming out the back end of COVID-19 restrictions, last Tuesday I saw my therapist for the first time in 16 weeks. Now, I usually see her once a week. So to go 16 weeks is a long time, and that would be one of my go-to recoveries. Just on this, talking about mobility and stuff, what's your go-to for recovery? How do you recover?
Look, as you can imagine, I've spent a small fortune on chiropractors and physios and acupuncture and everything over the years, and it's all helped. And I think there are great people in each of those areas. But I've really just had to come back to putting the onus on myself and making sure that I stretch every day. I use things like the Swiss balls. I mean, if you look in my office now, I've got 2 Swiss balls and a foam roller sitting here. There's always that sort of stuff that's in your house. And I think it's just really had to come back to just making sure that you're looking after yourself every day, because I think if we let things accumulate, that's when the problems start to happen.
Yeah.
So Yeah, and it's all about that ongoing maintenance, isn't it? And making sure that we're doing something nearly every day to try and manage and improve what we've got. I mean, even now, I'm still trying to improve. I'm doing things on a board now that I wasn't able to do when I was 36, 37. So that's probably the pleasing thing, that you can still improve what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah, that's your carrot, isn't it? That's your reward. If you can see improvements on the board, that's awesome. Yeah, yeah. But it's just remarkable how when we're youngsters, maybe not so much you because you had those spinal issues quite young, I mean early 20s, but you think you're indestructible, and yeah, you get to 40 or 50 and you're in for a rude shock if you don't know what a warm up and a cool down is. I used to always poo-poo them, but you know, I've got my tongue, my tail, sorry, not my tongue, I've got my tail between my legs very firmly. And with Metabolic Precision...
Yeah, I learned a lot of things the hard way, I think.
Hope no one got a visual of all of that. With Metabolic Precision, with the training, you taught me an awesome warm-up protocol that I use based on percentages, and I still use it a lot to this day. But like then you often go into 2 working sets per exercise, and I have a strong feeling that that was largely designed so that you wouldn't overtrain, that you did just enough work to progress. Would that be fair?
Yeah, it's I think with the whole thing about training too, and that was something that I sort of had to learn the hard way myself as well. When I was a teenager, I got into training so much. I think by the time I was 16, I'd virtually overtrained. I'd put myself into glandular fever. And I had to have a year off, all that sort of stuff. When I was 16, this is how bad I was, and you'd love this. When I was 14 and 15, I used to write out the weight training programs for the guys in my football team. So, like, you know, in high school, you'd be sitting there passing notes. I'd be passing the training programs to the other guys in our team. You know, I'd be writing out what the centres are going to be doing that afternoon. I'd be writing out what us forwards were going to be doing, your weight, the reps, everything. And I'd be passing them in maths and English and that sort of stuff while, you know, everyone else is doing whatever they're doing. And that was the sort of stuff I was right into, even when at that age. And the thing is, from that, I sort of, as you do when you're young, like you said, you just keep going and going and going until you point where you do destruct. And that really taught me at a young age. You've got to learn how to listen to your body, because I think a lot of people try to ignore that and just grind through the week and get things done, rain, hail or shine, or they try and do a 5-day-a-week program or a 4-day-a-week program, and they get really upset if they can't do it. And probably as a trainer, if I share this story with you, this was one thing that really sort of, it was like a lightning bolt. We're on the Gold Coast, and we had a couple of studios there, and we used to end up training a lot of tradies, and guys would come to us because, you know, the Gold Coast is like, it's very hot and humid and that sort of thing, and they'd try and do the regular split routines and, you know, 4 days a week and all that sort of stuff, and they'd come to us exhausted and say, look, how can we train? What should we do? And so what I ended up doing, cutting a long story short, was with quite a few of them, we got down to training once a week, where I would see these guys once a week in the gymming, and in that workout we'd do a bench press, a squat, and either a deadlift or a chin up, you know, one of those. And we just do it as, you know, as best as they could, as heavy as they could, and just try and increase. And that's one session a week, and the rest of the time they'd be working, doing what they're doing, tradies, that sort of thing. And I kid you not, I got phone calls from their wives and girlfriends, and they would ring me up and say, what are you doing with my husband? And I'm like, what do you mean? What's up? And they said, he's changing. He said, he's got muscle. I've never seen, he's never built, he's been going to the gym for 5 years, training 5 days a week, and he's never had muscle before. He's building muscle training, and you're training him 1 day a week. Are you putting him on steroids? Oh. That's what I used to get. And wow. I got this persona as a pseudo steroid sort of guy, because I had a science background and everything. I'm like, dude, no. These guys were growing from one session a week. Now, wow. That was simply because they were able to recover from what they were doing. And that's the whole thing that a lot of people just don't understand about training. Training is a stimulus, and the whole idea is to recover and adapt. And unless you give your body that time to recover and adapt, you don't get any benefit. You don't get any change. So if you are looking at physique changes, as in, you know, muscle, because we know that muscle changes body shape and that sort of thing, that's what I said with these guys. Like we'd start training 4 days a week, and I could see they couldn't handle it. They were getting smaller, weaker, tired. Then we cut to 3. Then we cut to 2 days a week. And then sometimes, like I said, we cut back to 1 day a week. And as ridiculous as that sounds, this is because a lot of these guys were out in the sun all day. You know, they were working from 6 in the morning to whatever, and probably not eating as great as they should, and all the other stresses with life. So we cut them down to a bare minimum. And it was only when we got down to that 1 session a week, they started to grow. And they grew like, you know, like I said, like their wives and girlfriends would call me up and accuse me of being a steroid dealer for them.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not talking about, you know, 20 kilos of muscle. I mean, you and I are knowing that's impossible to do, but, you know, you put 2 or 3 kilos of muscle on a guy or a girl, you change the shape of their body.
Absolutely.
You know? That's all it takes.
It's so interesting. And that kind of leads to, because that's a really big mistake that people make, isn't it? Is that they think that more is better.
Yeah.
And I guess when it comes to weight training, less is more could be a really handy mantra. Since we're coming out of COVID-19 and we're getting back into the gyms, you've kind of made the point there that overtraining is a big mistake. What's another 1 or 2 really common mistakes that recreational trainees, you know, you're still seeing them make those mistakes in the gym? What else would you?
Oh, everywhere in the gym I go to, everyone is obsessed with hoisting a weight from point A to point B. You know, you watch people do even a simple exercise like a pull down. A pull down is supposed to work. Everyone knows it's supposed to work their lats. Okay, yet everyone uses every other muscle they've got in their body except their lats to actually do that pull down, just to move the bar from point A to point B.
Yeah,
and that's the irony of training. The whole idea of weight training to change body shape is to learn how to put the overload on the targeted muscles. Now, to do that, you've got to keep the right biomechanics, the right body position, and, you know, the moving the weight from point A to point B is irrelevant. It's what you're actually feeling and how it's overloading those muscles that you're actually using. And that's probably the biggest thing that a lot of people they're not aware about how to position themselves, so that if you're going to do a row, how to actually make it work your lats, how to make it work your whole body, every muscle in your back without it hurting your spine. You know, all those sorts of things that a lot of trainers just don't teach because they're probably just not aware themselves. And that's a big thing that I see in the whole gym scene, even today, you know, 20 years ago, and it'll probably keep going long past we've gone, is people don't know how to intrinsically put their bodies into a position and keep it that way to overload the targeted muscle that they're actually working in the exercise. Bench press is another great one. But you watch guys do a bench press and the bar becomes a trampoline off their chest. And it's just like, dude, the whole idea of a bench press is to overload your chest. Yet they round their shoulders so it all goes onto their front delts, you know, and it shuts off any activation from their pecs, and they muscle the bar up so it's uneven and everything. So they don't actually learn from the get-go how to actually keep the overload on the muscles that they're trying to work. And that's something we've been teaching people for a long time, but it's something you still see everywhere.
Actually, that's one of the things I really enjoy from the powerlifting is it took my understanding of, you know, creating good leverage and lifting efficiently. And my current coach is always talking to me. Actually, he sent me back in my feedback this morning. He sent back my own quotation to him where I'd written, I decided to lessen the load a bit so that I had perfect execution. I really wanted to have a good workout today and do it very well. And he emailed it back and he said, that's what I want, Ingrid. It's always quality over quantity. And do you ever feel that sometimes when you go to commercial gyms to train that you need to be blindfolded and gagged?
I don't look. Yeah, I just put my head down and I train. I don't. Yeah. Charles the one. Charles likes to look around at everyone and everything, but I just sort of I put my head down.
Yeah.
But the irony of what you're saying there, Ing, is true. Like most of the good powerlifters, they train like bodybuilders anyway because they know that they have muscle imbalances they need to improve. They know they need to have strength over certain ranges of the range of motion that they're lifting in. And so they know that those 3 exercises, they're the foundation, but they know that there's also so much extra work that needs to go on throughout their whole body to make sure that that lift does, it works correctly, but also it works correctly in a way that they can continue to keep training.
Yeah, yeah, so true. So we want to touch on nutrition because everybody always says things like, "Oh, it's not the training that's the problem; it's my food." And you have a term in Metabolic Precision where you refer to meals as being metabolically precise. Now, what does that actually mean, and how is that, important to creating this, more muscle, less fat physique?
Yeah. Look, I suppose with the whole thing with MPing, when I started, I didn't want to actually have a brand. I didn't want to actually have, I didn't want it branded as something. And I suppose it's just become Metabolic Precision because people just wanted something to sort of categorize it into. But to me, it was a term. When something is metabolically precise, it just means it's suiting what you're doing at that time.
Okay.
And the whole concept, I suppose, what you're saying with those metabolically precise meals is you're eating for what you're doing, So, and I suppose the simple way of looking at that is, and from the courses, we talk about simple things like the typical Australian or even this typical US diet now is, you look at breakfast, it's cereal and toast and these sort of things, a lot of carbs, and then mid-morning's a snack of a muffin or a muesli bar, and lunchtime's a big salad roll or some sort of burger or something, and there's always carbs, and carbs mixed in with a lot of other things. Carbs and these sort of things are energy, and while I never say you rule out carbs, but my point is no one's actually eating for the activity they're doing, because probably less than 20% of the Australian population actually goes to the gym. That's the thing. Like even now, from recent surveys, it's less than 20% of people actually exercise regularly. So when you contrast that with the typical diet that people have, and then they come home at night, and the guys, especially the guys, they love to load up on the pasta and chips and everything else that they have because they burn it off during the day, they're construction workers or whatever it is, and they just get fatter every year. And it's all because they're not eating for what they're doing. They're having all this extra calories, all this extra energy, and they're not burning it off. And so all metabolically precise eating is, it's eating for what you're doing. And so if you're not working out at that time, then you're just trying to make sure you're eating as nutritious as possible without the unwanted, excessive calories. So in a nutshell, that's what, when we say something is metabolically precise. And when you contrast that, as you know, when you do a workout, you have a physiological response, which means your muscles are much more reciprocal to glucose and glycogen. So that's the good time to have your carbs, because we know that when you have your carb meals, with your proteins and your good fats after a workout, those carbs are actually shuttled directly to the muscles where they want to go to. So you can actually choose how to eat to fuel your muscles accordingly. And these aren't my ideas and beliefs. This is all sound physiological research that's been tried and tested and proven. We know these things happen. We've known these things happen for the last 20, 30 years, so they're not new. It's just the simple fact that when you do exercise, you create what we call a metabolic window in those few hours after the workout, so that the nutrition you eat actually gets driven to the muscle. And conversely, when you don't eat at that time, we get an accelerated breakdown of muscle, and you actually end up with a net loss of muscle tissue. And a lot of the ironies is when you see people that aren't improving with what they're doing, generally what's happening is when they do a weight training workout, their muscles are so accelerated in terms of the protein turnover and breakdown, they will get that protein from another muscle group in their body rather than their diet. And so you're virtually robbing Peter to pay Paul. So if you do a chest workout, you're robbing the proteins in your legs, and when you do the leg workout, you're robbing the proteins in your back. And so that's why you get people that have trained for years and years and don't actually improve, because they're not following these very sound physiological concepts that when you train, it creates a window, so you eat accordingly in that window to make sure that it goes directly to that muscle group.
So chrononutrition, or the science of nutrient timing, is actually incredibly important.
Yeah, look, I suppose that's a general term that a lot of people have used for it, nutrient timing, and I'm happy if that's what gets people to look at it or whatever. But that's one big thing that I've found over the years is that if you pay attention to that, what you eat after the workout, surrounding the workout, but more importantly, if you don't train and you're not training, to eat accordingly as well. And that's probably the other big thing of eating, as you know, it's what people eat in those hours outside the workout. Because let's face it, 3 or 4 gym sessions a week, that's less than 1 or 2% of your whole week. It's what you do with that other 98, 97%. That's pretty important.
Yes. I noticed through the week that you have put up a new article in Metabolic Precision that I haven't had a chance to look at. But I know that one of the hottest things at the moment, maybe for the last year or two, has been this intermittent fasting. Now, I'll be the first to say I don't know a lot about it. It doesn't make sense to me from the get-go. So I've never really pursued it. But can you kind of give the listeners a little bit of like a wrap up of what that research showed? And tell us, is intermittent fasting something we should jump on?
Look, I suppose in a nutshell, there's many different forms of intermittent fasting. There's a period of a day, there's whole day fasting, and there's 24-hour fasting. And so and as you know, you just got to type into YouTube, you get all sorts of videos and everything there. And so one thing I've always been big on, as you know, is I always look to the research and say, okay, what's the research on this?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter what the concept is. Look, and I'll say it straight out. If research showed that dancing with a grass skirt under a full moon with a southwesterly blowing accelerated fat loss, I'd be doing it. Okay? and I'd be writing about it.
Yep.
But research, and so the whole thing is it's about what a large body of research might suggest might be effective. And when you look at intermittent fasting, the research on it is absolutely scant at best. Right. And that's it's not sort of, I'm not trying to be the killjoy or whatever here, but you just got to look at the clear facts of what's been shown. And the thing is, yes, there's been probably 4 or 5 studies on intermittent fasting, similar to what I suppose a lot of YouTube channels have been touting and that sort of thing. But the studies have been very poorly controlled. They don't actually have control groups. There is a lot of difference in the type of regimes they use. Some of the fasting didn't even really involve fasting. It was like, you can still eat 30% of your daily intake as fasting. So, okay.
Right.
So I suppose, and then probably the most important point is when you actually do read the scientific papers on this stuff, and that's what I do. Yeah. And actually, I know I shouldn't take on a lot of credit because Paul Henning is Dr. Paul Henning. He's a really great scientist that has been a good friend from AST days years and years ago. He really helps with a lot of this and does a lot of the researching himself as well. When you look at the papers, what you actually see is the scientists, the authors that write this stuff, they don't actually ever mention and say, oh, intermittent fasting is the way to do this. Oh, it's best. Oh, it proved this to prove that. They don't even write that. All they've done a couple of times is maybe when they write their research articles up is show that they had a group of participants that did this and they end up getting the weight loss. Okay, great. But the thing is, they're also the first to acknowledge, look, we didn't actually use a control group, so we can't really tell if it's better than anything else. We can't really tell if it's better than just a regular healthy eating, calorie-controlled diet. We can't tell that sort of stuff. But of course, people then get that sort of information. The media gets that information. YouTube and industry and health professionals and trainers, they're trying to make a name for themselves as coaches. They get all this information and they just start doing what they want with it. When you actually look at the papers, you can see that there's not a lot of information there, particularly in humans, that actually shows that intermittent fasting has any benefit whatsoever in terms of weight loss, fat loss, improving body composition, and improving athletic performance.
Yeah, right.
And then you know what gets me is, okay, well, how come millions of people are trying to follow something with such little scientific credibility? And, how do these things ever evolve into the massive followings that they do when there's such small amount of scientific information that's on it. And really, Ian, what it comes down to is that people just want answers to their problems, and people just want to keep searching until they find an answer that they want to hear to their problems. And as you know, there's that many diets, there's that many different ways to eat, macronutrients and all this sort of stuff. So people are just so confused. So as soon as someone turns around and says, hey, the solution to your problem is you don't have to eat. You don't have to eat for most of the day. So everyone goes, oh, thank God for that. That's one less. And that becomes the big appeal of intermittent fasting, is that people don't have to worry. They don't have to think about what they need to eat. As crazy as it sounds, that's the biggest appeal of intermittent fasting. And for all the guys on social media that want to make a name for themselves, as you know, and you've got to go against the grain and shout out the most craziest stuff. So if you're going around telling people, hey, you don't have to eat this, you don't have to eat that, and you put up a ripped physique and this sort of stuff, all of a sudden that person who is just so busy, so stressed, so overworked, if they can see a solution and go, oh, gee, I only have to eat once a day. Oh, okay, I'll try that. So, that's how it sort of rolls, and it happens with virtually every different type of eating. Everything gets that momentum, sort of fades back down again.
Yeah, because it does sound crazy, but it is still a world of confusion. Because there are so many, I could even take an example of my second last coach and my last coach. They are on opposite ends of the scale, Paul. And I think they're both great coaches, but, what they bring to the table is polar opposites. And I mean, I'll be the first to tell you that I still get totally confused sometimes. I mean, there is a lot of information, but this is one of the things I like about the Metabolic Precision community is that you continually update it with cutting edge scientific information. And that's what people like myself and other good personal trainers and coaches are looking for, is perhaps a mentor like yourself, which is what you are, to give us that kind of information that we perhaps wouldn't go on to PubMed and try to understand ourselves. Yeah,
and I suppose that was the whole thing. That's what I positioned MP, and that's what I wanted to do, was to be able to give that to personal trainers so that they could do what they do best.
Yes.
So that, because they don't have time to sit up at night and wade through PubMed and try and pick articles and determine, what stats did they use, what population groups, what were the results interpreted correctly, and all that sort of stuff. So that's like with that intermittent fasting article, in a nutshell, that's what Paul and I do. We get the research and we distill it down into something that everyone can understand. And the thing is, we're not married to any particular way of eating, so we don't have a vested interest in anything. If something is shown to work or got a better chance of working for people, then that's what we write about. That's what we post. That's what goes into the program.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's never sort of struck me in the head to think, well, why do you have to be married to some sort of particular way of eating? Because as soon as you do that, then you really start narrowing yourself and you start defending your own beliefs and what you think is right. And that's the last thing that the industry needs, is another, self-proclaimed guru and that sort of stuff. But
yeah.
I'm off on a rant again, aren't I?
No, that's okay. It's all good. This is stuff that the listeners want to hear. So it's great. And one of my clients said, please ask him this. She wanted to know what your day might look like on a plate. So
that's a really good question. I've never had that. That's really clever. Tell your client that's really good. I've never actually.
I'll give a little shout out to Kirsty here on that one.
Kirsty, good question. Well done. Like the abstract thinking of that too. Good girl. Look, and the sad thing is we're just as bland, as boring as probably you are, and a lot of other people that you work with. Is we prep our meals like Shah's, got prepped down to an art form now, to the point where she's, got an entire cookbook of meals to eat so that it makes life easier. And so that we just do the same thing. We do our prep every Sunday and Wednesday night. You know, we pick a handful of meals, recipes that we like. We cook them up, we freeze them, and we always make sure that we've got meals in the freezer. And that becomes, because we work from home and, you know, we travel a lot and so we're busy, so that becomes your go-to. You know, you make sure that you've got the stuff there to be able to cook all the time. We chop stuff up. We cook it. Yes, I know it tends to be boring sometimes, you know, and sometimes you don't feel like doing it, but it's the easiest and the most fruitful way, you know, to get the health and the body shape and the energy that you want. There's no sort of getting around it sort of thing. And I know even the latest thing has been the meals that get delivered, you know, and you still crunch the numbers on the money that you spend on that. And then you crunch the numbers if you go into the shop yourself and you know, can't prepare it and everything. It's just still way, you know, the value is still a very expensive way to live, having a lot of that stuff delivered. But yeah, so I suppose in a meal on a plate, that's exactly how both of us eat, is, you know, every morning. The irony is we don't sort of eat a regular breakfast. You know, we will have, you know, I'll have one of Shah's chicken curries for breakfast, you know, something like that, or some sort of vegetable omelette that we might have made. And it's those sort of meals, as you know, in your background, the same way, you're always, it's just another meal. And as long as those meals are there, and that's probably a thing, isn't it? It's all about proximity, because we all know that sooner or later, whatever's close by, good or bad, you're going to eat it.
Absolutely.
So you've got to have, for a fighting chance, you've got to have those meals around you. So, yeah, so I suppose as bland and as boring as it is, and look, to say that is, you know, we're not fanatics, and Shah's not a fanatic, I'm not a fanatic. We still always got chocolate in the house. Yeah. I've always got a beer in the fridge. We've always got champagne. You know, we'll always have a couple of glasses of champagne on a Friday, Saturday night, that sort of thing. Yeah. So we're not monks, and that's the thing. Yeah, we'll go out to a restaurant. But I think the thing is with a lot of people, those sort of things have become the norm now, going out or takeaway food. It's only when those things become the norm, like it's only when takeaway becomes the everyday, that's when things start to fall apart. Yeah. And that's the biggest shift that we see in society at the moment, is that whole thing of, yeah, every now and then it's fine to go to a restaurant, it's fine to have a burger. If you love chips, have chips, whatever it is. But it's when that chips and burger become lunch every day, you know, 5 days a week. Yeah. You know, that's when the things start to build from there, and that's where the problems happen. Yeah.
I've got a little saying at the moment that the more you cook, the better you'll look.
How good is that? Hey, can we use it? There we go. We'll pay you royalties. We'll use it.
Quote unquote Ingrid Barclay.
Yeah.
But
that's fantastic.
I recall you saying in one of your audios for Metabolic Precision that if you're not prepared to food prep, you may as well chuck the book out into the nearest lake right now.
I was probably a little bit younger and a bit more belligerent back then, I suppose. But yeah, the message sort of flies. But it's become a lost art forming. And what with your mantra, what you said then, and this will back that up. We're cooking 10% of the time now compared to a household in the 60s. Like in the 60s, they used to cook more than 100% more often than what we cook now.
Wow.
As a society.
Wow.
Compared to a household, in the 1960s as opposed to now. The average American spends in the kitchen 15 to 20 minutes a week. Okay?
That is incredible.
Now contrast that to the amount of people that watch cooking shows. We know that the average American and even the average Australian will spend easily 4 to 5 hours a week watching their favourite cooking show. So there's a big paradox going on in our heads about this whole cooking thing. Is like you said, we're fascinated by it, and we will sit and we will watch a TV episode for an hour about someone cooking something that we will never cook ourselves and we'll never cook it. Is that true?
That is so true.
Of course it's true. Okay.
I've never thought of it like that.
Yeah. Look, it's bizarre, and the more you think of it, it's just absolutely crazy. So like I said, so when you correlate, okay, back in the 60s, we used to spend 60s, even late 70s, we used to spend a lot more time in the kitchen, and the incidence of obesity and cancers were not even not even rateable in Australia. We didn't even start taking obesity statistics until about 1980. So, and then you contrast that to now, where everyone's doing everything else except being in the kitchen cooking, like you said. Our obesity rates are absolutely alarming. You know, and our kids, their obesity rates are disgusting. And it's all coming from a whole generation of people that have grown up not knowing how to cook. And so they're passing it on to their kids, because kids watch everything that you do. So if you don't cook, you eat out all the time, or you get takeaway in, or you get Uber Eats all the time, this will be passed on to your kids. And that's, you know, you look at those two correlations between we've stopped cooking and our obesity and our health has plummeted. So there's got to be a relationship there somewhere.
Yeah. I actually have a client. I have no insight really into takeaway food, but she works for Uber Eats, and she says that she gets the same repeat customers, and that she will have deliveries where they live 10 houses down from McDonald's, and yet they come to the front door to get their McDonald's, like 10 houses away. That astounds me and horrifies me. And she kind of has a bit of a joke, and we joke about it, but it's really not funny, is it?
It's the fastest growing industry in Australia and the US is the home delivery service for food. It really is. And that's the whole thing. It's people think it's solving a problem, but it's only solving a short-term problem, because they're going to pay for this big time with their health later on.
Yeah.
And that's the thing now that I think that a lot of people aren't really getting. It's okay every now and then. It's okay on a Friday night, a Saturday night. Yeah, sure, we all get tired and busy, and I just pick up the phone and order a pizza. But it's when it starts to happen to be every day. You know, it starts to happen 2 or 3 times a week, 4 times a week. And the interesting thing there is a lot of your listeners, a lot of people will turn and go, oh yeah, but we don't do that. One of the things that I'm really looking at now is the psychology of all this. Because what I'm seeing a lot of the problems are never about food. It's all about the relationships and the associations and the habits and the beliefs that we have about food. So when people turn around and say, oh, we don't do that once a week, twice a week, we only do it at that time. There's a lot of behavioural studies that have tracked people that have claimed a lot of this stuff. And what our brains tend to do is they tend to block out our mistakes. So our brains, as much as we truthfully think we know something, our brains will block out that we've probably had that takeaway 5 or 6 times that week. We think we've had it twice. Wow. And all of a sudden, 2 or 3 weeks go by, 4 or 5 weeks go by, and it's a habit. And our brains are constantly saying to ourselves, no, we only do this a couple of times a week, it's all right. But we know from behavioural studies that follow some people around doing this, when we ask them, how many times did you think you did that? And they might say 2 or 3. Well, we've seen that you've done it 6 or 7. You know? So it's all those little things now that are starting to add up. So when we talk about this whole obesity phenomenon, you know, this multifaceted problem that people have about gaining unwanted weight and poor health as they age and that sort of stuff, these are all the things that we're starting to piece together now, that it's not just about the food. It's all about the relationship that goes on with the food.
Yeah. That's something that my listeners are well aware of, that I'm really interested in the emotional attachment that we have to food, and how to change our behaviours is absolutely imperative. And that's a fascination, because we're very good at justifying to ourselves and, like you said, pushing things to the back of our mind, but particularly the negatives, so that we're not really dealing with what we're actually doing. And we let our chimp brain take over from the professor brain. And the chimp brain is like the brain that's on steroids, because he gets his way all the time.
Yeah, that's a really good way of looking at it. I like it. Very simple. Yeah, I like simple. That's good. I like
Thank you. You can claim that. You claim that too.
I'll tell you what, I'll have to get all this material. I'll be quoting you now for the next month.
So we've clearly come off the back of going that cooking and kitchen prep is really important. But in an overall way, you have seen and been privy to more transformations than most people, thousands and thousands. And do you ever like what Success, I don't know, this might be an Anthony Robbins quote, I think. Success leaves clues. What are the key things that make an individual just successful at transforming their bodies?
Yeah.
What are the keys?
That's it in a nutshell, isn't it? It's because that's the thing. Like, I know that we've been talking about probably the merits of food prep and cooking and everything. And I know that there's people that are going to be saying, oh, I haven't got time for that. Oh, I can't be bothered. I'm so tired. I don't do that. I've got a life, or I've got kids and all this sort of stuff. And it just comes down to priorities. And as you know, we all have priorities and we all have a certain amount of time. And so whatever we do during the day and the night, it comes down to those priorities. And probably the one thing, if you're talking about, like you said, success leaving clues, is that one of the things that we talk about with MP is before the carbs and the fats and the proteins and the cooking and everything else is you've got to have a why. You've got to have a very deep-seated, personal, even almost quirky why you need to do what you're doing. And then even that is not quite enough. What you need from there is a carrot. You need a carrot that drags you through your why. Now, a simple analogy is, again, and I know people, we don't really have donkeys or anything like that now, but the old Mexican movies or whatever, you knew that back then, when you kick a donkey, it only moves a few feet and stops. And you've got to keep kicking it for the donkey to keep moving. But if you put a carrot in front of the donkey will walk forever because it's trying to get the carrot. And we're pretty much the same. We have to have a carrot for whatever we're doing. And with transformationing, and you can talk about, and people love to hide behind, and this is why a lot of fad diets get such amount of publicity and a following, is because people are looking for the answers in the food, but they're not willing to really address the real reason they've got the problems that they have, or they can't overcome those problems. So they think cutting out the carbs is going to be the solution, when it's really probably the fact you're up all night on your iPhone staring at social media till 1 or 2 in the morning. So you're sleeping in the morning, you don't feel like breakfast, so you get up and rush to work and you get a sugar hit on the way. So it's all those sort of things that end up being in the way of people's minds and their logic and what they tend to do. So that to me is probably it's an even more fascinating area than talking about the right proteins, the right carbs, the right fats, because none of those things even make any sense to someone until they have that deep-seated, gut-wrenching why that makes them want to do something.
Yeah.
And the irony is, and I remember this when I was a biomed student many years ago, we were testing a guy on a treadmill and he's very overweight. He's brought in his brand new runners. He'd never used them before. He put them on. He got on the treadmill, started walking, and within 2.5 minutes, his heart rate was well above 200 meters. And my professor that I was with and he was watching, he just slammed the button, stop on the treadmill. And the guy turned around and said, "What'd you do that for?" He said, "Because you were going to die." And he said, "Bloody good decision." But I used to go off to a cardiologist because he was a walking heart attack. And that was the only reason he changed. And unfortunately, in our whole industry, the way we are now, as you know, people only change when they have that conversation in front of their health specialist, their doctor, whatever it is, and that doctor says, "Listen, mate, you've got a problem. You've got to change or you're going to die." Because when you have a heart attack, only about 4% of people actually live through a heart attack.
What percentage, sorry?
About 4%.
Right.
Most people that have a heart attack, that's their first and last shot at it. That's it. They're gone after that. So this is what I mean. People, when we say this why, you've got to try and find this why before the real bad why happens, before you get that tap on the shoulder or that pathology reading that says you're in trouble, you've got to do something now. And that's the thing with our society now. We've got to try and learn, and as good coaches too, we've got to flesh out people's why before the really bad why happens. And 9 times out of 10, it really comes down to just wanting to improve and be better and be more desirable for their partner, or even if they don't have a partner, to feel attractive for themselves so that they might attract a partner. And that's really cutting into it. And as you know, in trying to get someone to break into that, wow, that's a real, to me, if I work with a client, as soon as they turn around and say to me, "It's because I'm doing this because I want to look hot for my wife," as soon as I hear that, I know problem solved. You're sweet. And it's the same as, we had a terrific lady in our Facebook group one year, and all she wanted to do was be able to put on her wedding dress that she wore 30 years ago for her anniversary coming up, like a 30th anniversary. And so what she did, God bless her, in our Facebook grouping, is she put a picture. She posted a picture with that dress on, and when she first put it on, it couldn't go all the way up her back. The zipper was still down around the waist. Yeah. But she kept putting that picture up, and every single month that zipper was going up more and more and more and more. And do you think everyone in that group was cheering her on? They were screaming for her.
Oh,
And that was her deep, quirky why. Like, you know, to be able to wear your wedding dress 30 years later, you know, some people might say, oh, that's a bit silly, or, you know, you've got to grow up and all that sort of stuff. But that was important to her. And that's all that a why really is. It's got to be important to you and you only. You know? Yeah. If it doesn't make sense to anyone else, that's great, because it's got to make sense to you.
You can't probably see, but I've got a little bit of tears because that I can relate that is really important. That's So I think that's great. The why, and the why. I ask questions when clients actually get to me for a consultation. I'll say to them, "Why are you here today?" And even 2 weeks ago, I had a fella turn up, you know, pretty tubby, like 5'4", 5'5", and maybe, you know, 100 kilo. And he got quite emotional, and he said, because my kid asked me to drop him off a block away from his friend's home. And I knew, and he knew what that meant without the kid saying it. And I got quite emotional for him. But I think that kind of almost sets him up for some success, because he's very in touch with his why. And I think when you're in touch with the why, you've got a really good head start. So that's great. So I hope everybody listening to the podcast is, you know, perhaps considering what their why is right now and reconnecting with it to motivate them to do this food prep that we've touched on and to get organised and cook more. Now, you have had a bit of experience in the supplement industry, and we can't wrap up the podcast without touching on supplements. And my first question to you, which is actually my question, I have a great article that you wrote probably over 7-8 years ago, which is your 12 top supplements for performance and body recomposition. And just for those that are listening that haven't read the article, which will be most people, I just want to reveal what your 12 top supplements were, Paul, and then I'll pop my question. So the first was a high quality whey protein. The second was creatine monohydrate. Number 3 was high quality protein blend supplements and meal replacement products. And I presume high quality being the imperative 2 words there. Neurotransmitter enhancers such as tyrosine and caffeine, which is great news for those of, Jesus. Shall I say, coffee does. We've got our growth hormone boosters, GABA and our glutamine, green supplements, so things such as wheatgrass or spirulina, the omega-3 EPA, beta-alanine, carb sports drinks, green tea extract, CLA, and then alpha-lipoic acid making up the 12th. Now, given the time and, what's been going on within the supplement industry since, are there any others that you would add to that list now, or would you take any of those things off the list?
Yeah, look, the supplement industry really took a bit of a dog's leg turn in the sense that, whereas back then when I was, as you know, I was the research director for a sports science company, and we used to look at specific ingredients, but now in the last 15 years or so, it's been all about formulations. And pretty much now everything's about proprietary blends, because when anything's a proprietary blend, you don't have to divulge exactly what's in the ingredients list. And that's where a lot of companies went to, and that's where the whole pre-workout formulation started, and post-workout formulation started, and pre-protein supplements and post-protein supplements and all that sort of stuff. So it's really difficult to actually look at, okay, what's working and what's not working, because you really don't know with a proprietary blend supplement, because it's probably got a whole gamut of things in there. And the other side of it is the companies can hide behind the fact that they might say all those things are in there, but they don't say the amount. So when you actually go to test them, then the amounts can vary. And so you've really got to know, if they say there's, if supposedly there's this amount, there's only a trace amount, they get off scot-free. So it became a sort of a very difficult industry to work in and be in, and everything evolves and that sort of stuff. But the irony is, to answer your question, probably in terms of supplements, it's more about the research just keeps coming out about, particularly those first 4 or 5 that you were talking about, how good they are, what they're used for. And it's mean a lot more research really has come out now about how to use them better, and why they work the way they do, and all those sort of more interesting things.
Right.
Probably one off the top of my head where you were talking about there is the carnosine supplement, beta-alanine, that sort of thing. That sort of had a lot of strong research behind it as well. Some of those ones have faded off, like the alpha lipoic acid sort of dropped off a lot there. But yeah, it's in terms of supplements, and also there's a big difference in between the type of supplement that might work, and 1, the amount that you might need to cause an effect, and 2, if it's cost effective, and then 3, if it's actually allowed to be used. Because that was the big clampdown about probably 4 or 5 years ago, where the ephedra, and because you're the same age as me, you know the whole ephedra scandal that happened. But ephedra was practically a safe and effective supplement, but because of all the litigation behind it, it virtually got taken off the market. And that really set a precedent many years ago for supplement companies to be very cautious about what they're actually selling, because the lawsuits practically drove a lot of companies bankrupt, or just it became too expensive to even hold that sort of supplement in their product line.
Yeah.
So there's all those sort of things. And what's been the bottom line of that? Well, the bottom line of that is firstly, for the last 5 years, supplement companies, all they've been doing is jamming caffeine in everything, because we know caffeine works.
Yeah.
So everyone's so exhausted, sleep deprived, that you jam caffeine into something that, I've got a hit, so you're going to keep using it. So we've seen caffeine in everything from protein powders to post workout, and you're getting people that are taking these products now, and they probably have a very low tolerance to caffeine, and they're getting really jittery and really sick and nauseous and everything, because that's what caffeine does when you're not used to using it. So it's kind of gone down that line, which has been a little bit disappointing, because we could have probably looked at a lot of other different things. The irony is, the supplements that were shown to work back then are still the ones that work to change someone's body shape. And as you know, with all the contacts that I've got over the industry over the years, all Sharon and I use is practically a really good whey protein supplement, a pure creatine supplement. We don't use the pre-post stuff, because 1, you don't know what's in it, and 2, you don't know how much creatine is going to be in it per dose, or how much caffeine's in it per dose. And coffee, that's my pre-workout stimulant.
Yeah, right there and then.
Yeah, same as you, probably. And so and then the eating and that sort of stuff really becomes the foundation, because the supplements are only that. They'll only supplement a good diet. It's the foundation of that diet. They work better. The irony is, supplements, as you knowing, they work better the better the nutritional program is.
Yeah. And that's an important take-home point for everyone that's listening, I think. But given that I asked the questions, what do we want to hear from Dr. Paul Cribb? Every second person said creatine. What's the go with creatine? Now, as I mentioned before, you're one of the world's leading experts on creatine. You know a lot about this stuff, and one of the my listeners, she said, I feel well, no, what did she say? She said she's always felt that it is something that you use only if you are bodybuilding. And this lady, she's 57. She's just trying to maintain and maybe increase her strength levels, improve her body composition a little bit as she's aging. And she wants to know, is it still relevant for her?
Yeah, look, the bottom line is yes, it is. It's very relevant because it's the only thing that really helps preserve muscle tissue, and it doesn't contain calories, and it's a pure product that fits perfectly into our biochemistry in terms of energy production. It comes from plants. The supplement's synthesized from corn, so it all sort of fits with a lot of beliefs and perceptions about the way we eat now as well. The only thing I think that it does a lot of people's heads in, and particularly females, and this is what we've found with transformation, is creatine, when you use it, it will put on weight in terms of probably 2 or 3 kilos over about 6 or 12 weeks. And if you're working with someone, or if you're a person that you stand on the scales every day and you're getting heavier, then it's going to do your head in. So a lot of the time we turn around and say, look, don't worry about creatine yet until we've got all these other things under control in terms of your body composition, and then you can start to use it. But if you're someone that doesn't get paranoid about the weight on the scales and you're more worried about your body composition and how you look and how you feel, then creatine is really, it's probably the most economical, most effective supplement that we'll ever have in our lifetimes. I mean, let's face it, a bag of creatine now is what, $40, $50, if that, and it lasts forever. And there's been nothing in research that's shown to enhance energy production within the cell, improve muscle fiber recovery, hypertrophy after training, antioxidant capacity, even in the brain. With all the latest NFL work, the head concussions and that sort of thing with a lot of the research on looking at, okay, these guys getting concussions, how can we get them to recover better or minimise the damage? One of the ironies is there, creatine loading, it actually gets into the brain and helps protect the neurons in the brain from damage during concussion, and it actually helps the brain heal faster.
Wow.
Yeah, so
that's interesting.
Yeah, and that's what I mean with a lot of the research. It's all about the bland, boring stuff like creatine, but some of the applications are just been, wow, that's amazing. So that's the sort of stuff that I've sort of been looking at for the last few years, and it's boring to a lot of people because they say, oh yeah, creatine, but what else? And it's just like, well, there's, in terms of bang for your buck, it's pretty hard to go past.
Yeah, right. And she also further asked, are there any negative side effects of creatine?
Yeah, good question. And again, one of the best things about creatine is it's just had that much research done on it over the last 20, 30 years. And the more they research it, the safer it looks, because we can't actually find anything that it actually does that might be detrimental to health or performance. The worst thing that could happen is if you had too much and you got diarrhea, because it might draw too much water into your stomach and make you feel queasy. But other than that, it hasn't been shown to cause cramping. It hasn't been shown to cause muscle damage. It hasn't been shown to cause cancer. A lot of really well-controlled studies from some very established laboratories over the years have all shown these things. And yeah, the research is all pretty much there that shows how safe and how effective it is.
Okay. And finally, are there people who shouldn't take creatine? Yeah,
there's probably a small, very small population groups that probably need to check with their physicians. Even if they check with a physician, we've found some people with kidney problems, because if you go to a GP or something, and rightly so, they'll say, no, look, don't use it. Fair enough. But we've even found people with one kidney and kidney medical conditions. They've worked with their GPs and they still use it because it still fits in with their assessments of what's going on in their bodies. When they get their pathology done every 3 weeks or whatever. So it really does come down to horses for courses. There's very, very, very few people that probably it really rules out for them.
Right. Okay, thanks a lot for that, for clearing that up.
That's all right.
It's quite a topical supplement, isn't it? It always has been.
Yeah, it has been. Yeah, because it single-handedly revitalised the supplement industry, because it was the first supplement you could take, and within a week you actually saw and felt the difference.
Yeah, yeah.
Apart from caffeine, there's not much else that you can actually take that you can feel that straight away. And with creatine, it's not so much a caffeine sort of feeling, but it's after 2 or 3 days of using it or a week of using it, you're stronger in the gym, your muscles are fuller,
And who doesn't want some of that?
Right, exactly right. And that's the thing. And I think we all should be doing that, because the whole thing is, with every passing decade on this planet, we're losing muscle. The average adult will lose up to 7 kilos of pure muscle in their adult lifespan, and they'll replace it with 15 kilos of body fat. That is the average unavoidable aging process. So
Wow.
we're trying to fight against that like hell, with our weight training and paying attention to what we eat, because we don't know what the research ramifications of that are. We're only sort of starting to touch on, you'll like this, people that have been weight training for 30, 40, 50 years. We're only just starting to see people that have the results of research of that sort of stuff now. Someone that's been training with weights for 20 years, what do they look like? What does their body composition look like? Because we didn't have that, 15, 20 years ago when I was going through, medical school and these sort of things. We didn't have, but now we're starting to get that, and we're seeing, people that weight train all through their lifespan are showing body composition levels of 20-year-olds.
Yeah.
This sort of stuff, and they're showing lean mass that's preserved way beyond someone who hasn't done any sort of weight training throughout their lifespan. And so then you start looking at the things like preventing diabetes, preventing heart attacks and heart disease. Because a lot of people don't realise that muscle is the only thing that metabolizes fat. And so when you lose muscle, what do you lose? The ability to metabolize? Fat. When you start to lose the ability to metabolize fat, your blood lipid profiles change, don't they? So they start to increase towards the risk of a heart attack. So it's all those sort of things that people don't really equate with the whole muscle sort of thing. That's only sort of starting to come out now. So weight training and doing what you're doing with your clients is the single most important thing that probably anyone should be doing to create health and longevity for their whole lifespan.
Yeah, one of my old mentors, he used to always say weight training is the fountain of youth, and I think that's something you've said too. And I mean, this sounds really morbid, but if I end up having requiring surgery or something, or I've popped off my perch, I just want to be on that table and the surgeon go, wow, she's easy to get to wherever they've got to get to. Yeah, why not?
Exactly.
Because,
I'm with you there.
I train a surgeon, and I also train an anaesthetist. And what she tells me she sees that winds up on the operating tables, they're consistently dealing with very obese people where it's difficult to perform these surgeries.
Yeah, so, it's too late. Yeah.
I'd like to be the opposite of that.
Yeah.
Now, I've just to wrap things up, I've always thought of you, Paul, as a bit of a visionary, and I guess with your contacts and your work, what you do, I always feel like you're a step ahead of everybody else. And I guess that means I want to ask you, where do you see personal training heading in the medium term? Is there always going to be a place for personal trainers, do you think?
I think there's always going to be a place for personal trainers, definitely. And I think it's probably more the disappointing thing that's what has happened to the industry, because, to be honest, the industry hasn't evolved over since I've been in it. It's all because personal trainers are very insular, and they haven't actually created a network that shares successes and failures, and they learn from those successes and failures. And it's a very psychological thing that I think is a very unfortunate part of the industry. But good trainers tend to keep to themselves, and they don't want to share what they're doing. And it's stopped an industry from, because essentially to me, what you do as a personal trainer is the most important health promoting thing that anyone could do. Because let's face it, a doctor can't do what you do. A nurse can't do what you do. Naturopaths don't do what you do. Dietitians can't do what you do. You actively improve someone's body composition like no other profession can. And we now know, the medical profession knows, that building and preserving muscle is the key to a healthy lifespan. We know that. There's no question. But then, okay, so why aren't every personal trainer just inundated with plethoras of people wanting, to work with them and, help them prevent and achieve all the things they want to achieve. It's because personal trainers have shot themselves in the foot because they haven't tried to gain that credibility and that confidence that makes the public and makes a health professional say, yeah, I want you to go to such and such, or I need you to go to such and such. You ever notice when you go to a doctor and you've got a sore shoulder, the doctor will write you out a referral to go see a physiotherapist or a myotherapist, but they won't write you out a prescription to go and see a personal trainer, will they?
No, generally they don't.
No, because they don't trust personal
No,
trainers.
they don't.
No.
I agree.
and personal trainers are their own worst enemy because that's what happens. Like we start becoming intermittent fasters, we start becoming this, or we cut carbs out of people's diets, or we do all these silly, stupid, crazy things just to try and get a name. Personal trainers are just all they want to do is create a name for themselves. Whereas if they focused on actually helping people, that would give them the name that they always craved. Personal trainers are so busy trying to me, I'm this, I'm that, I do this, I'm coach this, I'm coach that. When if all they just stopped and did was devote themselves to helping that person, then helping another person, then helping another person, and that everything else takes care of itself. And that's the irony of the personal training industry. And unfortunately, I think it's always going to be like that. But that's not a discredit to the people in the industry. I'm just saying more as an evolution for personal training. That's the way that it was when I got into it, and it's still the same way now. It hasn't changed. And if anything, with social media, it's just got worse. Like, as you know, you look on Instagram and every man and his dog is a nutritionist or a personal trainer or whatever it is, and no one gives. Everyone just sort of takes in the industry. They don't actually focus on helping someone because they're so busy trying to be the next big thing, or to say the next big thing, or shout the loudest on social media, or say the most craziest thing on social media to get noticed. It's a real funny sort of industry that we're in, as you know as well as anyone.
Yep, it is. And finally, what does the future hold for fitness in general? And do you have any predictions for the next big thing?
You know what? It's really hard because you look to genetics, and we're still just as confused as ever, because what we're seeing now is, you start talking about looking at genes and trying to eat for genes and exercise and look at risks of genes. That's all sort of very pales into significance because we've started looking at epigenomes. And what epigenomes are is the environment around the gene. So what I'm saying there is you can have a set genetic makeup, but those genes are constantly being influenced by the environment that it's in. And it can be, if you've got a marker for something, we don't know if that marker is going to have any influence unless it's in a particular environment. You know what I mean?
Right.
So you try looking at those sort of things, and it's really, all you really learn from science now is the more you learn, the more you realise you don't know. So the human body is just such a marvellous creation. Like I said, look at the technology that we're in now, and it's going to obviously get better and better. We still can't make a heart. We still can't make a kidney. We can't build muscle. The only way we can build muscle is picking up a barbell and a dumbbell. We can't do those sort of things. So that tells us how delicate and how intricate our own bodies are. And that's why it's more important to look after what we've got and focus on just making it as good as we possibly can for our lifestyle.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry if I can't sort of give you that.
No, that's all good.
And all that sort of stuff. But I think the methodologies of what we're doing now is improving all the time. Like, for instance, we can trace, if you eat protein, we can trace where it goes now. If a molecule of protein, we can trace it if it goes to your muscle or if it doesn't. We can trace that if you do a weight training session, we can see if it goes to what muscle group it goes to, or if you don't do a weight training session, where does it go to then? So it's all these sort of things that we're starting to get that'll probably give us more pieces later on. Maybe
right. Yeah, and we won't care.
We'll be in the nursing home just lifting our 1 kilo weights, going, I got a PB today.
All right. Well, I've taken up enough of your time. It's been fantastic actually reconnecting with you and talking with you on such a variety of topics. And I'm a Metabolic Precision trainer, and I love selling Metabolic Precision. And so any of you listeners out there, if you want to jump on board, we can, have a look at the Metabolic Precision website and contact me. And look, I'm sure everybody really loved to hear your thoughts and views on things. I found it interesting.
Right.
Yeah, you provide some really, really good insights and thoughts, and I'm sure that everyone will take not just one or two things, but many things from today's chat. And I just really appreciate you giving up your precious time, Paul.
Cool.
It's been wonderful.
I think we've just scraped the top of the iceberg, and I reckon there's heaps more stuff there we can talk about.
Yeah, there certainly is. I mean, I could pick your brain for hours and hours, Paul, but you'd be over that.
But look, the feeling mutual. I mean, people don't realise how long you've been in the industry, and there's not that many people around, that have got that sort of wealth of experience to share with working with someone. So
yeah, I'm starting to feel like an old timer, Paul.
yeah, but it's an old timer in a good way, because it means that the amount of knowledge and experience that you've got, when you work with someone, they're going to tap into that. What you're going to be able to give them is just so special and so unique, because what you offer can't be bought. It can't be fast tracked. You've got all those sort of things. So to work with someone like you would be amazing. It'd be a privilege.
Time is indeed a good thing, isn't it? It does give you that experience that perhaps a textbook just can't. But, look, all the best with you. And, we're going to keep in touch anyway. And, again, just thanks a lot for your precious time, Paul.
No problem, man. Pleasure to talk to you.